Jayden Daniels and Saquon Barkley continue to shine as they head to the NFC Championship, while Mark Andrews lets down his team big time in the Ravens' loss at Buffalo. We discuss the top things we learned in the divisional round that can have a big impact for fantasy next season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, we got through all 4 games of the divisional round. Both of the games yesterday were a ton of fun, but the biggest surprise of the week was Jayden Daniels going into Detroit and taking down the Lions. I mean, he just looks so good, right? And he's been so good for fantasy and the fantasy points he's been putting up in the playoffs as well. So should he be the first quarterback taken in drafts next year, knowing his upside and what he's shown as a rookie?
Yeah, I mean, there's a case for that. I mean, I think they'll only improve his weapons, and he has really found Diami Brown to be a second guy after Terry McLaurin. He's in the zone with Zach Ertz. I think you've seen this offense kind of take off again in the playoffs with Eckler back, Austin Eckler, because he's such a key guy that you can get into open space. He's a check down guy. It's kind of interesting that they were very steadfast about Brian Robinson Jr. being the red zone back, and you got to hand to him. He was stonewalled a lot last week, but was able to get a couple touchdowns there. So this offense is on fire right now. They're doing everything right. They're not turning over the ball. Jayden Daniels has got that second target, but he's also got those guys that get open for him like Ertz and Eckler when he's in trouble. And it's just been an evolution. If you look all season long, he's tried to find that number 2 receiver. He's got him, and now that makes him all that more dangerous when they have somebody they can rely upon to make some big plays. And I've liked Diami Brown since he was in North Carolina. You just need a quarterback who can get on the ball, and they realize, look, this kid has speed. Terry McLaurin has speed. We just got to put a lot of speed and quickness, and you got Ertz and Eckler who can be quick in the middle of the field around this guy, and he's going to produce, and you've seen that at a high level. Everyone was a little skeptical, right, about the supporting cast. What was McLaurin going to do? He's never been a big touchdown scorer. He's never had a big year. Then all that kind of changes because of Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury operating in the system. So it's a really strong system. Let's hope now Cliff Kingsbury doesn't become too attractive and decide to leave for a head coaching job. I would still lean that he wants to stay there. He's getting paid plenty by the Commanders. He wants to see this thing through, and why wouldn't you want to be attached to Jayden Daniels a little while longer, right? I mean, this is a great situation for Kingsbury. They're going to keep winning. And he's just clean. Like, he's just beyond his years in terms of just never being rattled. He takes off and runs when he needs to. 4th down, they trust him so much on 4th down, and he comes through more times than not in a high-pressure situation. So, again, all that going back to the first question, I think there's a case to be made. Look, the bottom line is he going to get the rushing touchdowns, right? That's what's made Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts really up there, right? That they get these cheapo rushing touchdowns at the goal line, even when other guys are scoring at the goal line. So they don't really call Daniels' number a lot for that type of touchdown, right? So that's what it comes down to. Will they just be too good overall where they can diversify? I think Daniels is still an easy top 4 pick. I don't know if you want to go all the way to 1 because of Allen and Jackson and Hurts and what they can do on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, there was 2 games this year that he did not finish the whole thing. Week 7, he barely even played before getting injured. And then week 18, he didn't play the second half. You take out just those 2 games, include these playoff games, he's averaged 23.2 fantasy points per game in those 17 games that he had at least 15 pass attempts. That would be only second behind Lamar Jackson this season. So I think after Lamar, because Lamar's just so safe, right? Then it should be Jayden. Now, Saquon Barkley, another huge day for the Eagles. The Eagles are heading to the NFC Championship really just because of Saquon, right? It's like this passing game is not doing anything in these playoffs, but Saquon is just a beast. 205 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns against the Rams, add another 27 yards as a receiver. But I was thinking maybe I want to go to Bijan Robinson next year at the 101, but like watching him in these playoffs, I don't even know if you can do that. I think Saquon just has to be the 101 because what you're hoping Bijan can even get close to what Barkley has shown his ceiling is this year.
Yeah, my only concern, and history has shown this, when you overload the back, and we saw this with Josh Jacobs, we saw this with Christian McCaffrey, that you're going to have some production regression, or what's going to happen is there going to be some durability issues. We're not going to be able to stay on the field. And look, Saquon Barkley, before the season in Philadelphia, doesn't have the greatest track record of staying healthy. And now you put on this massive volume on him, not only like massive volume throughout the regular season, just dominated touches, but now he's got to maybe play 3 playoff games, maybe 4 playoff games, right? This is going to add up the mileage, turning around and being that good. So I'm not saying Saquon Barkley can't do it, but I would say the odds are against him finishing as a top scorer, right? And if that's what you're looking at, 101, then you're saying, okay, who else is going to be there? But then you look at Bijan Robinson. Are there any really other good candidates? I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs might be that guy if Dave Montgomery was out of the picture, right? And then you could think that way. Maybe it's Ashton Genty wherever he goes and he becomes a rookie that has no mileage in the NFL. Look, you can be playing devil's advocate. Who else if it's not Saquon? But Saquon would make a lot of sense. Like, I think you have to go there, maybe hope that Saquon's a little bit like Adrian Peterson, where his physicality and his athleticism, they make him a little bit freakish. Derrick Henry, Adrian Peterson type, where he can hold up. So, again, I don't think there's a better answer than Saquon Barkley. And I'm not saying it's by default, but Barkley now provides the better answer. And look, a little bit of history going against that. He may not finish at 101 scoring, right? Because it hurts stealing touchdowns, but he's the safest in terms of exactly what you're going to get. And his usage is going to be great.
His usage is really killing AJ Brown this year. Like AJ Brown's receiving yards per game actually didn't really drop off much from the 2 previous years with the Eagles. It was 83 receiving yards per game this in 2024, 85 in 2023, 88 in 2022. It's the receptions and the targets that just like disappeared, right? And then these last 3 games that he's played, he's just not being used at all in the postseason through these 2 games. 10 receiving yards. No, sorry, 24 receiving yards, 3 receptions for 24 yards in the postseason. He dropped that long, could have been touchdown in the divisional game. But like, I don't know what the Eagles are going to do with AJ Brown. I don't really think they can move on from him. The contract, I mean, he has $61 million in dead cap next year. Like, they can't cut him, obviously. I don't know what the money would look like if they trade him or if a team would be willing to trade for him with all that money. But that's going to be interesting to watch with AJ Brown. How far does he drop in drafts with Saquon Barkley there?
Yeah, I mean, AJ Brown is the kind of guy that you just expected boom or bust. I mean, he had 5 or 6 really good games, and then the rest of the games, blah, like he can take over games. And it really comes down to how our team's covering him, right? And he's been kind of inconsistent in separating, whether he has single coverage or double team. He has a double team, forget about it. Jalen Hurts is not going to throw in his direction. He's not going to force the turnovers. They can go to Devonta Smith or pivot to Dallas Goedert and not need to throw the ball that much, frankly, when you're running so well at this high frequency under Kellen Moore. It's not going to open up a lot of opportunities. And when he sees those key targets, like that ball he missed was out of bounds, you got to make the plays on those balls. And now it'll be interesting to see what happens with Marshawn Lattimore. They had kind of mixed result in the first matchup. Like, they needed a lot of volume, right? And AJ Brown's needed the volume. And if he's not getting that volume because the Eagles are running and having success, then he's not going to do a lot. But this could be a game where there's volume, right? The Commanders are probably going to bring their offense at a high level. They're going to have to throw a little bit more. I don't think the Eagles can just get away running with Barkley in this game and just win that way. So I think there's some promise this week. AJ Brown won several battles against Lattimore the last time. I figure that's going to be the game plan again because it was pretty even and close. And for everyone out there, looking like AJ Brown, they can move on in 2026, right? There's a little bit of a manageable thing they can do with his cap hit. So he's also going to be getting close to 30 then. He's 28 now, so he's probably going to have some diminishing returns. I would not want to take him as a wide receiver 1. I'm just going to be frank. For next year, I think you have to look at him as a wide receiver 2. Maybe they add a third option here, right, that they need behind him and Smith. Dallas Goedert's getting older, so they can look and pivot and get a third receiver or another tight end, someone in this mix here to help Jalen Hurts. So, yeah, A.J. Brown, you can't love it. Again, you just have to know what you're getting. Boom or bust, and it's been more bust this year.
Yeah, and if they're going to keep being this successful running the ball, it's hard for, especially if they're going to make the Super Bowl, right? We'll see if they can beat the Commanders, but they're probably not going to change too many things up next year if Saquon's been carrying them. We have some tight ends to talk about. Let's take a quick break. We got to get into Travis Kelce having a big game again in the postseason. Of course, he comes alive. And Mark Andrews, man, I was going to say he dropped the ball, but he literally dropped the ball for the Ravens. We will discuss after we come back from the break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. Let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. The strongest hiring data available. LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used it here for our organization with sporting news and all that. I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is critical. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else, from unique skills and interests to the connections you share. LinkedIn helps you find that right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates. Check it out. It's important to make the right hiring decisions, however big your organization is. Having access to insights like what skills candidates have or how they're connected to your network, that helps you feel confident when you pull the trigger. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire at LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. It's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you also by the PrizePicks app. And look, it's the conference championship time. And if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final 3 games of NFL football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in for you. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, and you got a lot of other sports that you can look at as well, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. And it's very easy to play. You just simply pick more or less on PrizePicks on player stats, such as passing yards, receiving yards, rushing touchdowns, and you'll get a shot up to win up to 1,000 times the money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. When you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout, want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with more than 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. And now, don't forget, we'll have our PrizePicks picks of the week. We did really well last week. We had Jahmyr Gibbs and his receiving yardage. He almost got it on the first play. We had a great combination that Michelle went with Travis Kelce and Dalton Schultz, and Travis Kelce hit it all by himself. So that was a great one that we looked at. We'll go more on the show. You can always go less. Just check it out there, only at PrizePicks. It's your place to have a special offer as well. For Locked On Fantasy Football listeners, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue. Let's get into that Mark Andrews situation that you teased. And look, Mark Andrews typically does not fumble. Mark Andrews typically does not drop balls. These two things happened in successive fashion to cost the Ravens a victory in the divisional playoffs against the Bills. I don't know. Like, he's a guy that I've liked, and he had a slow start this year. Then he came out strong. He was scoring a lot of those touchdowns with Isaiah Likely and working in, and they had a good tight end set. But now Mark Andrews can be cut. It seems ridiculous that they might think about this, but $11 million in cap money can be saved. Isaiah Likely was looking like a good go-to guy. So what do you expect, Michelle, here? I don't think they'll part ways with Andrews, but maybe the role might shift a little bit going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's such a good touchdown scorer. I don't know if they're going to want to take that away from Lamar.
Yeah.
But, I mean, 2 brutal errors last night. They win that game probably without the fumble. The drop, like Josh Allen was still going to have 90 seconds and a couple timeouts to go down and, try to take the lead. However, it was just huge by Mark Andrews, and they can save $11 million against the cap if they cut him this offseason. And it just depends on how much they like Isaiah Likely, and do they trust him to do all the roles, you need to have to be a full all-around great tight end like Mark Andrews can be. His production definitely dropped off this year in terms of like yards and targets and receptions. The touchdowns were still there. But it will be interesting. He hasn't showed up to any of these press conferences after the game. Just got another alert that he wasn't there today to talk to the media either. I don't know if that's the team keeping him away or what's happening, or if he's just, doing it himself. But that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, we had the Lions lose, like we brought up earlier with Jayden Daniels. Very shocking. Was that Ben Johnson's last game with the Lions? I mean, that's our biggest worry right now. And going into the offseason, Sam Laporta had another good game to end the year. He started off so poor, and it felt so bad because of how high you drafted him. But the second half of the year was really, really solid. Now, it's still not good enough with going like second round like he did. But I do think he's now at a point again where he can be a solid middle round tight end target next year.
Yeah, you just have to be very careful about overhyping a tight end from one big season. I mean, Trey McBride was still pretty good, but he didn't score. And that was frustrating for those people who took him pretty high. And you had Sam Laporta. He just is not going to finish that high. It's very hard to do that in consecutive years if you're a tight end, unless your name is Travis Kelce. Then you're going to consistently come through, maybe not anymore. We'll talk about that in a moment. But when you look at Laporta, they were going to expand their passing game a little bit. You saw Jameson Williams become a big factor in a lot of games, and he was missing a lot of time. He had injuries and then suspension. He didn't get into the mix until kind of when he came back this year, and he became a key big target. But I'm on St. Brown. You saw they weren't so dependent on him down the stretch. They kind of opened it up for Williams. They let Laporta do a little bit more. So I think there was some good numbers that we can feel good about us taking him as a tight end one. But again, I don't think I bang the table and take him to the top three. I don't go there necessarily. I mean, Bowers is going to be there. McBride is probably going to have a bigger year where he gets in the end zone. So those are probably the leaders of the young wave. And then we'll see how George Kittle and Kelce fall behind that group. And maybe we look at, hey, Laporta's back over Andrews, right? For sure, after what we've seen. So I think Ben Johnson's gone for sure, Michelle, to answer kind of your first question. I mean, Dan Quinn looked like he was Dan Campbell, I should say. Dan Quinn was happy. Dan Campbell was not. And I think he kind of is reserved to the fact that he's going to get one of these jobs. There's just too many openings with too many teams that have money and need a guy that has an offensive mind. So we'll see how that changes. Look, I mean, Ben Johnson did also try to throw a wide receiver option pass when they were down big in this game. So there are other people who can execute this offense, but we'll see how that coordinator hire goes. It's going to be very interesting to see where they go. Do they keep the same style of offense? Do they go in a different direction? Does Jared Goff have familiarity? So there are a lot of questions to answer, but again, individually, the talent is still there between Williams, Laporta, and St. Brown to figure those are going to be their big three, so-called, in the passing game, along with Jahmyr Gibbs as an addition to that.
Yeah, I would be shocked if their new offensive coordinator, if Ben Johnson leaves, isn't already on the coaching staff. I mean, they've known now for a couple seasons that Ben Johnson's going to be gone soon, right? So you think that they're, working with someone to kind of take over his role once he's gone. Maybe that's Mark Brunell, the quarterback coach, Scotty Montgomery, the assistant head coach / running back coach. Like, I'm sure one of these guys, they've been kind of grooming to get ready for OC job once Ben Johnson's gone. So it might not be that drastic of a change. It's always scary when a really talented play caller leaves an offense. Now, Travis Kelce, you brought up that maybe you would take him ahead of Sam Laporta next year. I would not even consider that whatsoever in any moment. I want to just engrave in my brain, I do not care what Travis Kelce does in the postseason this year, right? He balls out in the postseason. It's who he was. It's what he did last year. After a down second half of last year, he comes into the postseason, has 70 or more yards in each of the 4 games, a couple 100 yards games in there, some touchdowns, and we're like, he's back, right? So we draft him early. And then they're just saving him for the postseason again this year. It was a terrible fantasy season. He's only going to be older next year. I don't care if he has 200 yards next game and 5 touchdowns. I'm not drafting Travis Kelce next season. And I mean, obviously everyone has a price if he was to drop like crazy, but I just want to put it out there. I don't care what Travis Kelce does this postseason.
Yeah, and you also have to keep in mind there's a chance he hangs it up, and he may not even be an option. Like if they get another ring, he might hand out a ring to somebody else, and then it's over. He can just ride in the sunset. He's got plenty of stuff, right? He's made a lot of money. He's got every kind of other venture here. He's all over the place. I mean, he's going to be fine money wise, no matter what, given the current situation. And he's got the ring. So there's not much. If he gets one more, that's 4 rings. I mean, what else do you need to do? Like,
Yeah.
so there's a chance he could walk away. But again, if he comes back, he's probably going to be in like, wake me up when the playoffs happen. You guys will get it. We'll be here. We'll probably only lose 1 or 2 games. I'll be fine. We'll win some close games. Other guys will come through. Noah Gray will score a couple times more than I do in key games. But I think he's now what you call load managed kind of veteran player, and the Chiefs know they're going to be playoffs every year with Mahomes. So why would you kill it? They know they can also win if they're not the number 1 seed. They proved it last year. So again, he's a guy that we have to slowly fade down. We'll see if that kind of puts us in the mood with Kittle and Andrews, like if they slowly need to be knocked down. But I think the big 3 in the future of this position really are Laporta, Bowers, and McBride. Those are the guys that are kind of taking over as the young guys, and that's where you should be targeting. Maybe we'll see Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren added to that mix here this year. But you got to look at the young tight ends, and those are the rising stars.
Now we got to move over to running backs. There's some, running back takeaways from this weekend as well. Isaiah Pacheco was so bad yet again. Kareem Hunt was led that team. He looked much, much better than Pacheco. Has he lost his value? Kyren Williams can't stop fumbling the ball. So yeah, we're maybe Matthew Stafford. That was Matthew Stafford's last game with the Rams. Who knows? He might hang it up. It seems like Cooper Kupp probably is definitely done with the Rams, but will Kyren Williams be the running back for the future for this backfield? We'll get into that right after a quick break. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So a big reason why the Rams end up losing to the Eagles. It's not the only reason. Stafford had his issues as well. He also had a fumble in there too. But Kyren Williams fumbled for the 6th time this season in this divisional round loss at the Eagles. The Rams only end up losing by 6 points, right? And it was at a big moment in the game. The Rams were only down 16-15. It was right after their big safety to, close up that gap there. But it was his 4th fumble lost this season as well, most in the NFL by a running back this year. It's the fumble issues, and next year is his last year on his rookie contract. If he would have had a big game without a fumble and they would have won, right? And he could have had a big postseason, I think they would have given him that contract extension, right? But can they trust Kyren Williams with these fumble issues to actually extend him this offseason, or they're just going to see what Blake Corum can do in his second year?
Yeah, history shows these later round running backs eventually break down, and usually it comes down to the durability and can they repeat it. I mean, it's like the Dameon Pierce factor. I'll go back James Robinson, that name I'll throw out, that these guys have those years and then something slowly diminishes. And I thought that could happen for Kyren Williams this year, especially with the drafting of Corum. But they're going to have to look at that a little bit more carefully. I know Sean McVay likes to stick with one back from game to game, but maybe we look at it as a committee. Maybe they're going to open the competition if Corum can be a little bit more explosive and hold on to the ball a little bit in the offseason and camp and preseason. Do we go in that direction? So Kyren Williams, again, we can't be totally confident about his role. He did actually break through for 100-plus yards rushing.
He had a solid game besides the fumble, yeah.
Which is a tough Eagles run defense, but maybe not so much after what Jacobs and Williams have done the last 2 weeks here. So, again, when you look at that, I think you just say, hey, I mean, will the Rams commit? They can be fickle. We've seen them start with Todd Gurley under Sean McVay, but then things have happened where we had a messy committee that were trying to commit to one guy. Then Williams comes along, and we remember that Darrell Henderson type mess that they used to have, and we were like, oh, Cam Akers, when is Cam Akers going to get it done? And then that didn't happen. So he can be a bit fickle, McVay, about his running backs. We'll see. I think Williams is going to have a good offseason. I think they still love him in terms of the way he shows up and plays hard. He's a very good guy off the field as well, and I think that's part of it. He's got a high character, so I think that's what they like about him. He's a good locker room guy. He's the Walter Payton Man of the Year finalist for this team, so there's a lot of good things about Kyren Williams that can help go in his favor here to help him keep the job, but I think the Rams would be kind of off if they didn't look at Blake Corum a little bit more and see what he could do in year 2.
Yeah, I was not worried about Blake Corum at all until this game. You can't keep fumbling like that, and that really cost them maybe their season. And it was a big reason why they end up losing a close game. So now I'm a little bit worried, I'll say. Now, a guy I'm super worried about with his fantasy value for next year, it's Isaiah Pacheco. Since coming back from the injury, I mean, it's just been terrible, right? It's been 32 yards, 26, 18, 18. He had 18 rushing yards on 5 carries in the divisional round. That's all he got in the week 17. 6 carries, 18 yards. Like, he's not being used. Kareem Hunt was clearly outproducing him. He has scored 1 touchdown this entire season. And next year's his last year on his rookie contract. He's super, super cheap, so they can keep him, but also still sign someone else and use that money because he's so cheap. Or if they don't want him anymore, he's $19,000 in dead cap. I don't know if I've ever seen a dead cap so little in my life. That wasn't zero. $19,000. So Pacheco, he's going to have some competition next year. And I don't think he's a very great running back. I think he's been overhyped, and I don't think he is going to be valuable for fantasy next year.
Yeah, what did I say about late round running backs that they drop for a reason? There's things that are concerning. Can they stay on the field? I mean, durability issues. Is Brian not 100% healed? And he came back a little bit earlier. And again, he's got a one-note type of runner, right? He runs hard. He can explode a few times. But if the blocking isn't there, and the Chiefs' blocking has been off, let's say this, the running game has dropped off a little bit here. And I don't know what's happened with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, but they haven't been as good, right? In the middle, opening the holes. And he's kind of a one-note runner, so he's not going to create too much, right? He's not going to jump cut and get some juice the way we see like a Jahmyr Gibbs. That's just not going to happen with Isaiah Pacheco, right? I mean, this is not that type of runner. So these guys are usually limited system backs that can't do too much. And Pacheco was actually coming on as a receiver. He looked great last year. I mean, what a difference a year makes. Like, he was the key part of their Super Bowl run. Now he's probably a very limited factor to get them there. So, again, we'll see about Kareem Hunt. I think this ball points, I mean, they gave up on Clyde Edwards-Helaire finally this year. Maybe the Chiefs need to invest a little bit more in a power back or someone a little bit higher. I mean, they did invest a pretty good pick on Kareem Hunt as a few rounds earlier when he was all working, but I think Hunt is now older. It's got the volume. So we'll see what happens with Pacheco, but there's no way really you can go there the rest of the way here in fantasy DFS or whatever you look at. But I would think they're already eyeing their replacement. And now I think it just happens. I mean, we've seen this with Cooper Kupp, and we'll see like if he's coming back, but sometimes there's just like an alpha that appears. And like we saw that Puka Nacua. So again, I'm not too crazy if Pacheco's back to go after him, or Kupp if he's back to go after him with the Rams. Age, injuries, ineffectiveness, all these things can just happen in a hurry. And I think we're seeing these in these situations.
One later round running back who may be saving his starting job next year. It's Brian Robinson Jr. Finally had a good game. It was a very long time in between good games, but he scores twice against the Lions. He puts up 77 rushing yards on 15 carries, over 5 yards per carry. Like, he looked good, and the Lions have not been an easy team to run on all season long. So that was shocking. Now, it was a long time, like I said, in between him having good games. So I don't know if that fully saves him and they just give him the starting job next year. But he has this week to still show something. Maybe they win again. He has a Super Bowl. If he can keep putting up these performances, then he should still probably have a starting job next year. But I don't know that just this one game will keep his job.
Yeah, I think they have a role for him. I mean, Austin Eckler, still looked pretty good. I mean, came back. I know he missed a lot of time, but I don't think it was a coincidence that their running game and some of their offense in general was not good with Eckler, because now you have that complimentary guy, and that makes Brian Robinson a lot more effective, right? When you have Eckler who can come in, cause some matchup problems with his receiving ability and all that, then you bring in change of pace and you're pounding Brian Robinson. You've been trying to catch Eckler, then you put in Robinson at the goal line. He's going to be a lot more effective off that. So I think he's a committee back. He's a power back. He's meant to be used during the near the goal line. Like they've tried to plug in other guys, right? We've seen it. Chris Rodriguez. I mean, Jerry McNichols scored a late touchdown in this game. So look, they had to plug in those guys. Robinson had some durability issues, but again, he should be a complimentary back, and that's where he's going to be more effective, and that's going to give you your most fantasy value. It's almost like a older, kind of lesser version of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. It's almost like that here for the Commanders. And so think of Brian Robinson Jr. as a much lesser David Montgomery. He's a complimentary back, play the matchups. And Eckler, again, same thing. Flex type guy, play the matchups. And I think the Commanders will probably continue with that committee next year.
Yeah, maybe they do. I mean, they have other holes to fill, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what route they go with that backfield. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking more fantasy football goodness. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.